Hello, today is April 19th, 2022. My name is Stephanie Da Rosa. I'm interviewing Cristela Cavazos for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Cavazos, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is anything you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Collections Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and or documentation you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright or non-exclusive right to the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with your interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes.
Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes.
Okay. As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We used information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
No.
Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. I look forward to what you say in the interview questions I will now ask. Okay. No. Ms. Cavazos, thank you for your time. Like I said earlier, your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and to our partners at the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Because you are an instructor of secondary education in the Rio Grande Valley, and because you are a woman and a mother of a young child, I know you will have many meaningful stories and experiences to share on how COVID-19 has impacted these roles that you carry out in your life. So before we talk about COVID-19 stories, can you please share with us a bit about yourself, who you are and how you wish to be known? Who is Cristela Cavazos?
Hi, well, thank you for this interview, Stephanie. I'm Cristela Cavazos. I'm from Westlake, Texas. I was born and raised here. I've been able to come and go between Mexico and the United States for most of my life. Having a house over there or having a home over there meant that I had access to both worlds. I graduated from the University of Texas Pan American, which is now known as UTRGV. I currently teach 8th grade reading at Idea Donna Public Schools, or Idea Public Schools in Donna, and I am currently a mother of a 3.5-year-old boy. And I do like to travel. I do love to read. This is why I teach reading. And I do enjoy spending time with my little boy.
So the first section of questions asks you to please share your stories and memories from when the COVID-19 pandemic made its first impacts in December 2019 to about the summer of 2020. So the first question I want to ask you is, can you share some memorable stories about how you first heard or learned about COVID-19, whether that be on the radio, TV?
I remember hearing about it at the beginning of 2020. We actually happened to fly to Michigan to a funeral in February of 2020. And it was just starting. I had heard about it on the news, and we were in Michigan for a few days. And I do remember one of my cousins sharing that they had already like a couple of people infected with COVID. And by the time we left a few days later, and we got back to the valley, the news just started blowing up with more COVID-related information. And then, within a month, by March, we were getting ready to leave for spring break, and it turned out that we never went back to campus again, or we didn't go back to campus for that school year. So that's when I first.
And you said this was around February, right? When you first heard?
It was like early February.
And so what were some of the early reports or rumors you were hearing on the news about COVID-19 back in 2020?
I just remember hearing it started in Asia, and then that it was just like spreading all over. And that it was bound to happen. I mean, people do travel, so it was eventually going to get to us. We just didn't know how soon it was going to get to us. But it was just, everything was COVID related as soon as it hit. Like that was all that was covered in the news.
And at what point did you realize this pandemic was a serious life-altering event? Or do you not think it was serious?
I did think it was serious the moment they shut down everything. The moment they shut down our schools, the moment travel was restricted, and seeing people here around our area looking for groceries and out of all things toilet paper and other things that it was just things that people thought we were going to run out of. Just seeing that there, how people reacted to it, that made it a little bit more concerning.
And do you remember what it was like for you during the stay-at-home orders in 2020? Do you have any stories from that time that you could tell?
So at that time, I was living with my mother and my little boy, and I had a family member here from Michigan who had actually come down in early March, to visit, because we had our grandfather here, and he came down to visit. He ended up being stuck here until June. So he didn't go back to Michigan until June. And every time I needed something, like we had to go grocery shopping or just anything, he would accompany me to go, because it was kind of, crazy with people out there trying to get everything. And that was the only time that I would go out, just to go buy essential things. Other than that, we would just stay at home. We didn't visit our family members for a while, like for a very long time. It was maybe about all the way from March up until, I don't know, June, July, that we saw some of our family members again, especially because most of my family has has conditions. So we just didn't want to risk, anybody. My grandfather was 97 at the time. And so we didn't want to because we were out having a grocery shop or having to go pick up things. We didn't want to, go and all of a sudden be exposed to it and then expose our family members to it. And so we just you know, we only did what we had to do, which was go and get the essentials and come back.
And over the last couple of years, what news media, social media, or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about COVID-19? And why do you prefer these news sources or these forms of?
I would just rely on like TV news, and every once in a while, whatever would pop up on like my social media. But even then, after a while, it was just too much. And I remember being like at home while we were teaching or working from home, and I had a break like around 11 for lunch. And I remember the TV always being on during lunch, and that's all I would hear. It was just the news, and we would watch, what was it, Univision, because my mom speaks Spanish. So we would watch, and it was COVID this, COVID that, until after a while, I was just like, turn it off. That's all that I'm hearing. So let's just turn it off. And I did. Eventually we turned it off, and, or just changed, you know, the station to where it was like nothing COVID related. Not that we didn't believe in it or anything, but it was just like getting overwhelming, just listening to the same thing over and over and over.
And I think like having the same information just kind of like thrown at us over and over again, it didn't make us like anybody feel any better. It would make, and look, I know personally it would make me a little bit more anxious about going out, just having to hear everything. Because I was the one who was like leaving my house to go do whatever we had to do, because everybody else in the house had like conditions. So yeah, that I completely understand. And okay, so now can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease and how you feel it's impacted society? Likewise, you can share with me what you don't understand about COVID and wish you could know more about.
So what I know is that it's contagious, and anybody can get it. Nobody is, not, I don't know. And what I don't know is I'm just wondering, when will it go away? I mean, it's been around for a while, and yeah, there's like other, conditions or diseases, but that exist and that have existed for so long. But at this point, I think people just want normalcy. People want to go back to what we would consider normal before COVID hit.
Yes. Okay. Do you feel your family has the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some members who take it more seriously or lightly? How so?
No, I believe we're all on the same page about it. We all take it very seriously. All of us take our precautions at the very beginning. Like I said, none of us visited each other. It was a very, very long time before we saw each other in person, but we would all keep in touch. And then eventually, as vaccines started coming up, and everybody, and I want to say everybody in my family is vaccinated. Everybody decided to make that choice just based on our family itself, on both sides, from my mom's and my dad's. We both have family members with conditions. And then we also saw, firsthand how people were dying, and how people within our family as well. Like, thankfully, none of our immediate family members or, first or second cousins passed away, or family members, but we did have like extended family members that did pass away, and we couldn't be with the family. We couldn't attend their funeral. We couldn't do anything. So that made it even more serious for all of us, because we lost family members that, we couldn't even be there with, we couldn't give our final respects to, and we couldn't be with our family itself to, to accompany them during that hard time.
And well, what was it like for you to get your vaccines, and have you gotten your boosters?
I did. I got both vaccines, and then I got my booster just recently back in December. I didn't feel anything. I just, like, as far as a reaction, I just remember like my arm hurting the next day and just feeling tired. But other than that, I didn't get sick. I know like my mom developed like a cold, a few weeks after. It was attributed to that. Nobody else got sick, but I feel fine with it. It doesn't mean that I'm letting my guard down just because I have it, but it just makes me feel like a little bit safer.
Yeah.
And I did, and
And
I did get COVID. So, but I got it just like back in February of this year. And I thankfully didn't have any, I did have some symptoms, but when I first tested for it, it was negative. And then like after all the symptoms went away, that's when I tested positive. And I wasn't like, I didn't feel all of the effects that other family members who weren't vaccinated before the vaccine was available felt. So like in my case, I think it wasn't so bad because of that, because I had the vaccine.
And how was it scheduling for the vaccine? Or was that relatively easy, or how did that go?
That was easy. I scheduled it through the first two through UTR
Mm-hmm.
the website. I ended up having to go to Harlingen for both. And then the booster, I did that one through HEB. And I had to go also to Harlingen because that was what was available at the time. So it wasn't very hard at all. This process was fairly smooth, like practically no, it wasn't a ridiculous amount of waiting anywhere. So it was okay.
And there was no hesitancy to get your vaccines or your boosters?
At the very beginning, yes, because it was like something new for us. But then toward, as it started, as more people started getting it and started seeing that they were okay, then it was just like another deciding factor to get it, and I did.
Alrighty. So then these next set of questions, Ms. Cavazos, are going to ask you about how COVID-19 has impacted your life in the way of your family and career. So I'm gonna ask you, so you shared with me in our pre-interview that you have a young son. How has COVID-19 impacted your family life in terms of interacting with others outside of the home? You had mentioned that for a while that you hadn't seen a lot of your family. How has that changed now?
It's way better now. We do see each other, we frequent each other, but we all stay within our family. Like we don't go and we just stay within our family when we get together. And we all make it a point to let each other know if one of us is sick. It's like, no, but that person's not showing up. And even if it's not COVID, but just out of precaution, we just don't show up. We'd rather be safe than sorry. And with him, I mean, I take him everywhere with me. It's just him and I. So wherever he goes, he wears a face mask. I'll wear mine as well. And I didn't have any trouble with him getting adjusted to it because he would see us wear it. So it was fine, and he would ask for one himself. So it was okay. Like, and whenever we go out, I'll be like, put on your face mask, and he'll put it on right away. Like he won't even take it off. So it's been okay.
So I know, like for young kids that don't understand what's going on, that they don't understand why they have to have something on their face. So that's kind of one of the things, like with children. And also pertaining to young children is, I know for many parents, sending their young children to school during a pandemic was concerning, and some even opted to have their children homeschooled. And having mentioned that your son is still not of school age, will the ongoing pandemic affect your decision to send him to school or have him be homeschooled / online schooling?
No, he'll be sent to school. I mean, we still have another year. He's he's from September, so I have to wait until August of 2023 to get him in school. I get to keep him an extra year. So for right now, that's not really like a concern, like a major concern, but I do know that I am going to enroll him in school. He won't be homeschool or online.
No, online, okay. And was your family concerned with the return of in-person classes, like when you guys were giving the okay to go back on campus?
Yes, we were, because cases were still high and we just didn't know what was going to happen. We were like, it was emphasized or heavily suggested that we were going to go back, and that was the only option going back, at least for us teachers. Students had the choice of doing in person or virtual, but we didn't, so we had to go back. And it was kind of scary at the beginning, but then afterwards, since last year we didn't have a lot of students present, it wasn't so bad. And everybody was in their own classroom and there was a very small amount of students. So it wasn't too concerning. It was, but it wasn't like, overpowering everything else. And thankfully, like last year, even though cases were higher, the amount of cases were higher, we didn't have cases within our 8th grade, within our grade level, which was a very good thing. I think we were the only grade level that never had any cases at our campus. So, and even us as teachers, none of us had it. Like we were exposed to other people, but thankfully none of us ever tested positive. So none of us ever had to deal with that then at that moment.
Okay. And are there any other family members with school-age children? Did they have any concerns with online courses and the return of in-person classes?
They did. I have one of my cousins. She has a teenager, or she's about to be a teenager, and for her it was a struggle because both her and her husband work. So, and she was at home alone doing online learning, and it turns out that she wasn't joining classes, she was failing. And so when the teachers reached out, they made the decision to send her to school because otherwise at home, nobody was going to be there to watch her. Nobody was going to be there to make sure that she was actually, working. So she ended up having to go back to, go in person once that option was offered at their school district.
Alrighty. So the next set of questions, we are going to be talking about how the pandemic has affected the work you do as an instructor with IDEA Public Schools. So this next question, how long have you been employed as a middle school English language arts teacher?
This will be my 6th year. This is my 6th year teaching.
Your 6th. And it's your 6th year with IDEA, or?
My 7th, actually. Yes, my 7th year with IDEA.
With IDEA.
So I did a year and a half of subbing, and then I started teaching afterwards.
How have you seen COVID impact your work? For example, when were those impacts first experienced? And how has COVID-19 impacted your teaching practices at the start of the school year of 2021 to how they have changed now to the school year of 21 to 2022?
So you're asking me how has it
about like last school year compared to this school year?
So the 2021 and then the 21-22.
Yes.
So last year it was the 20. Can you give me a minute? Steph, I have to take a really fast phone call. Give me a minute, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, I'm able to press pause on the recording. Okay. So I'll repeat the last question. How have you seen COVID impact your work? For example, when were those impacts first experienced, and how has COVID-19 impacted your teaching practices at the start of the 2020-2021 school year? And how have they changed to now the 2021 to the 2022 school year?
So the 2020 to 2021 school year, there was, I think that for me was hard itself because I had to prepare virtual lessons and in-person lessons, and it was different. It wasn't the same thing. I had to adapt myself to the different needs versus like always just teaching for students inside a classroom. We had to also keep in mind that a lot of students didn't have great internet connection. Now we were not the only ones that were connected trying to teach at the same time, so that impacted it as well. And it made us as teachers, or at least myself, adapt really quickly to the whole virtual experience, because when we were given that opportunity, or that option back in 2019, 2020, the 1920 school year when it all happened, we didn't have we had the option of like either like being live or pre-recorded, or and most of the time I did pre-recorded and my video was off and it was just the audio, because I wasn't used to that. I mean, I preferred having my kids in front of me. And then once 2020 and 2021 happened, last year, school year, we had to show our face. We had to be connected, all of the time. And there was no way around that one. So it was another experience for us as teachers to, yes, we are always showing our face to our kids in person, but this time it was over a camera, and it's not the same as well, because we had the cameras on, but our students did not. And so it was also a matter of having to call parents and let them know their kids weren't connected. A lot of them were asleep. A lot of them just connected or logged on, and that was it. They were gone. They had the monitor on or whatever they had. They were connected, but that was it. And and we couldn't also require them to show their video. So we had no idea if they were really there or they were just, unless we called on them, which we did. And it was a lot of, silence, because trying one student after the next, until one of them like picked up. And then we had our usuals that we always knew we could rely on. But again, it wasn't fair on them to always being called on just because they were there. And then there were students that were not connected and we were calling on them. And it was just like not the best experience. It was really hard. Like, it was very challenging. And then this year, it was very challenging at the beginning. It still continued to be challenging, I think. And I mentioned this with my coworkers, with the rest of the grade team, where it must have been February where we finally broke some ground with our kids as far as structure, as far as discipline, because we struggled a lot with getting them where we needed to be. Granted, it's still, it's a work in progress, because after, 2 years of being at home and not having any sort of structure, we knew that there were very little amounts of parents that were actually, on top of their kids, making sure that they were doing their schoolwork and all of that, versus the amount of parents that, unfortunately, for one reason or another, wouldn't do that. And it was difficult trying to get them back into a structure, changing their culture, changing their mindset, getting them to realize that they needed to work this year, because last year they were able to get away without, a lot of things, or getting away without doing a lot of work. But this year it was different. So it was a big, it was a huge amount of work to get the students to get them where we needed to be, especially because, we're in Texas, we have STAR, and we still have goals to meet, and we still have, expectations for us. Just because, the pandemic is still going on doesn't mean that things have become lenient with us as teachers. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know some of the students have gotten like used to the leniency, and they kind of like still expected it. It's like, no, you're here now. There's, you're coming to class, you're here and you have to be doing your work. Some of them, of course, it's a work in progress. And were there any concerns about the effectiveness of remote or online learning for educating your students? How so?
I'm sorry, you asked if there were any concerns about educating my students. What?
Like the effectiveness of online learning.
Yes, we knew there was going to be a big gap to address, because, for example, our students, they're 8th graders. So the last year that they had a normal grade, or normal year, was back when they were in 5th grade.
Mhm.
And from 5th grade to right now to 8th grade, it's a huge jump. Right now, I mean, they were in 6th grade when it happened. So they are now, that was regular math. And in 8th grade, they take algebra, they take biology, they take the reading and the US history STAR test. So they're taking, and the Spanish class. So it's an introduction also to high school, because they're taking 3 high school credits.
Mhm.
So to go from like not having any structure during, or, not that they didn't have any structure, but from like a year and a half of doing whatever they wanted to, coming to 8th grade and realizing that, hey, we have 3 high school classes, 3 high school credits, and 4 STAR tested subjects. It was a lot. So we as teachers
Mhm.
were concerned, because we compared to last year's test scores for those that showed up for STAR, and they were academically low, like their performance was low. And so it's a huge
Mhm.
investment in these students to make sure that they get up to where they need to be, at least to the, at the 8th grade level, because it's hard trying to catch them up in months, what took like years, what normally takes, a normal school year.
A normal school year, and they were out for about a year and a half. So to have, yeah. And what changes have you made to help support your students who have, I guess, struggled a little bit more academically in the classroom, who have struggled trying to adapt, like going back into that environment?
Just a lot of structure, and like a lot of, and no, the word isn't enforcing, it's more of like adapting also as a teacher to their needs, because a lot of these students lost very close family members. A lot of them were on their own during all of this time. So I've had to just adapt, if it requires like a different reading level, or if it requires me working one-on-one with them, versus years prior, it wasn't so hard. Now it is. And then also realizing that we can't even get close to them like the way we used to, like you teach, right over their shoulders sometimes, and this time you can't. It's just something that's changed for us, and I feel like we've had to change as well in order to keep up with all of that.
Which leads me to my next question. Have you had to take on any extra work duties because of COVID-19?
The only, not really. Now that, give me a minute. Hold on.
Okay, so let me repeat the last question, which leads me to my next question. Have you had to take on any extra work duties because of COVID-19?
Yes, we have. In school, at work, we had to, so we have morning duty, which we have to be present by at 7:10. And normally we always stand outside our classrooms, and the students would stand out, like they would sit outside the classrooms until 7:30 when it was time to come in. But because of COVID now, they have to be in our classrooms or like as soon as they come in, they can't go anywhere. And then after school, the same thing. We have to stay with our kids until they get picked up by their parents, if they're pickups, or if they get called to the cafeteria to wait, like as a group over there. Another task that we were assigned is having lunch in the classrooms. Whereas before, that was our lunchtime as well, and we would send the kids to the cafeteria on a regular school year. But now we've had to rotate. So 1 month it's 8th grade, and then we're 1 month is 8th grade in the cafeteria, and then the following month is 6th, and then 7th. So it's 1 month us in the cafeteria, and then 2 months that we have to have lunch with our kids in the classrooms, and then again, up until it's our turn again.
And has there been any other policies that the campus has enacted in response to COVID-19?
The campus?
Yeah, the campus itself. Has there
Okay.
been any changes, policies?
Yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, we wear our masks. That's been like it's not a requirement because it isn't, but it's highly suggested and highly encouraged. And for the most part, almost everybody is compliant. They've also made it a point to every morning, I know our custodian goes and sanitizes our doorknobs, our light switches, and the high contact surface areas. We as teachers have our students sanitize their desks, their areas before they transition to the next classroom. And there's washing stations outside in some of the hallways. And there's also hand sanitizer available all over school. So,
do you know if the institution has any worries about finances or student enrollment because of the pandemic, or has everything continue on like as normal?
I think everything's continued as normal. I think we've been able to have the expected number of students enrolled that in normal years. I don't think they have. I really don't know. So I can't really answer that question. But from what it seems like, we've had the same amount of students that we have on a regular basis there.
Because I know when there's open like spots, there's always new students coming in as well. So yeah. And do you know maybe any employee or staff member that may have been impacted by COVID-19 financially and all the changes that have occurred on campus, or not that you've heard of?
No, I don't think I've heard of anybody.
And do you know if there are any current plans in the case schools are to close again for any reason?
I haven't heard anything about that either.
Nothing about that? Do you think that the institution campus has responded adequately to the pandemic, or could something more have been done, or it's it's going as well as it can?
I think it's going as well as it can. We were one of the very first school districts to open up our campus. We started school at the beginning of, for the 21-22 school year, we started school, as if it was a normal school year. We didn't delay. We didn't, there was no delays in anything for us. And so I think it was the way it needed to go.
Of the different modifications that you mentioned on campus, like the different policies, is there anything else you would have liked to have seen that, or like considered necessary on campus?
No, I think the school did what they've had to do. They have plastic dividers like on the desks that we sanitize. I think it's become the new norm. Like it's expected already. The students really don't need to be told what they need to do. And as far as us as adults, it's like we're also okay with everything that's being done there.
And what has been the response from your students to all the sudden changes that have occurred over the last 2 years?
I think they've adapted pretty well to coming to school, and the expectations of having to sanitize as they walk in, sanitize their hands as they walk in, as they walk out, having to sanitize their areas, making sure that they're following protocol. But I mean, they are also teenagers, so for a lot of them, it's like, as much as we try to tell them, don't share this, don't share that, or, separate, we can only do so much, because at the end, they're going to make those decisions. There are kids, that take their extra precautions and never, ever, ever take off their masks. there are students that will remove their masks and then we'll forget about it and we just remind them. And again, it's not like we enforce it on them, but we do remind them, and that's all it takes for the most part. I think they've adapted well. They, at the very beginning, I think that they were scared, especially because they would, it was back to school for everybody, and they really didn't have a choice of whether they wanted to do it at home or stay at home or come to school. But I think by now they're adapted, and the fact that we haven't seen any new cases on campus for a very long time is something good.
And relating to like the different experiences on campus and activities, is there anything that you think you have missed out on or the students have missed out on, like different trips and maybe graduations, ceremonies and stuff like that?
Yes, definitely. We used to, so every year we would take them on field lessons or college field trips. They would tour universities here in Texas, and we would stay overnight depending on the location that we were at. And, for the past, 3 years prior to COVID, the kids really looked forward to it. They really enjoyed it. And it was like a good time for them because they also got to unwind and relax, because it is stressful. They said there's 4 STAR tested subjects, but it was also their little escape and our little escape as well, in the middle of the year, to be able to give them an experience, because eventually the whole point for them is to go to college. So at least they were able to experience, 4 or 5 universities on a 2-day trip within the same area. And this year they were asking about it, and unfortunately, there were no plans for that for any grade level, not at our campus. We also used to do a lot of pep rallies, and we haven't done one, in a very long time. We used to do assemblies as well, and that hasn't happened either. Even like the games, at the very beginning of the school year, it was only sometimes just the players that attended the game and they played, and there was no spectators because, for safety reasons. But now, slowly that's coming back. But again, it's limited. And what else? The cafeteria, them not being able to be in the cafeteria together, with their friends, instead of being divided into classrooms during lunch. Also, that's something that they're missing out on.
And have they, like, I know you said they asked about the trips. Have they asked when things might change or like possibly go back to normal, or if that's ever gonna happen soon?
Yes, they have. And just like recently, last week, we were talking about that. And they were asking about the college trips, because we had a virtual college field lesson 2 weeks ago. But again, it's not the same experience as actually being at college, visiting the colleges and universities. So they did ask, and I mean, from what I've heard is they are going to bring them back, but it's until next year. And there's like so many, I don't know if the word is limitations, or there's just going to be so many different things now, that are going to be in place for that to happen, especially with
Okay. And okay, so you've talked about the different modifications and changes on campus. Is there anything you see yourself like retaining or keeping in the classroom once like this pandemic is, over, or once it ends?
Is there anything that I want to keep?
Like anything that you wouldn't do before the pandemic in the classroom, whether it be, I guess, like sanitizing or the maybe keeping your distance or stuff like that.
Oh, that I wouldn't do, but now I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was just that the sanitizing and the keeping our distance. We were all we actually kept our rooms clean, but not to the degree of where we do now, where everything has to be sanitized and every class period. We also, and they're keeping our distance. We hardly did that because we walk around the rooms. We don't sit down while we teach. We're always walking. there's always proximity to the kids. And then just the wearing of the facial mask.
Mhm. Okay. And in this section, this is the last question. So, are there any other stories or experiences that you would like to share? Anything relating to the classroom, trips, anything like that?
That it's taken us a very long time to,
Mhm.
to build that culture with our kids, especially, after them being outside of a classroom for a year and a half,
Mhm.
but that it's doable. It is doable because we've now been able to build those relationships with our kids. There was kids that I think whatever they lacked at home, as far as structure, as far as interest, as far as that, they've been able to see that they get it on campus, so they get it within our
Mhm.
team. And it's been really good to develop those relationships, because that was one tough group. I know you've subbed for them, so you can attest to that. But they have been, we've learned to be able to adapt to this new norm. We've been able to ensure their safety as well. That was our priority, make sure that our kids were safe and that we were safe as well. And build those relationships that we used to have, that they see, like with our, sophomores, with our juniors that stop by, even with the freshmen from last year, even though, it wasn't like the way it should have been last year, but we were able to develop them. So at the very beginning, our kids would wonder, like, why the sophomores and juniors would stop by and visit us, why the seniors would come and say hi to us. They're like, oh, but you're so mean, or you're so strict and all of that. But I don't think they understood why we needed to be strict with them, why we needed to have structure with them, because then otherwise this wouldn't have worked out the way it has already. And so now we are able to, like, get along with them very well. Not that we didn't, but it was just a little difficult, for myself, speaking for myself. And now it's like, okay, like, let's keep going. Like, we're almost done. We've made it this far, which is like a huge accomplishment, because there were times where I honestly felt like I wasn't going to finish the school year. But fortunately, we're in April and we have like 6 more weeks of school. And so it's been going good.
Okay. And well, now we're going on to the last section of questions. So this last section asks you to share any stories you have about this pandemic and the response by the local, state, and national elected officials. Feel free to respond or pass on any of the questions. Do you feel satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in Hidalgo County over these last 2 years?
Yes, I am.
Are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by Governor Abbott over these last couple of years?
Not for everything.
How do you feel about the national response to COVID-19 led by President Trump in the year 2020 and then President Biden from 2021 to present?
I felt like there was a shift in the way it was handled from one presidency to the other. But that's as far as I'm going to comment.
Okay, that's not a problem. If you had the power of a political office to respond to COVID-19, what would you do differently?
I think I would just inform and make sure that it's, I guess, accurate. I feel like sometimes we don't get accurate information, but I guess that's it. It happens as it comes, or it comes as it happens. But I think that's it.
Ready. So this is a special year in our national democracy because it's a midterm election voting year. Do you plan to vote? And if so, the issue of COVID-19 going to factor into your votes?
No, not for both.
Okay. Will you consider the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic in your vote for a presidential candidate?
Not voting.
No. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share with me about your experiences with COVID-19 that I have not asked about?
No.
No. Okay. And the final question. What impact or purpose do you hope your story may have on listeners of the Voces of a Pandemic digital archives?
I'm just hoping that they get a different perspective, especially from an educator, and just a different perspective. I guess I think every position is essential, especially during this time. But I feel like there's a lot of pressure placed on a lot of us, and we're held to the same expectations as if it was a regular school year. So hopefully, like the listeners or just know that we are doing our best, and we really are doing our best despite the numerous things going on, because we're not only educators, but we're also family members, and we also have our own families to take care of. So just them getting a different perspective on what it is.
Alrighty. So thank you, Ms. Cavazos, for sharing your stories with me and the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History Project.
You're welcome.
Thank you.